So yes, I'm a senior expert and fellow at PlanAdapt, and I will have my presentation will be a little bit about PlanAdapt, and then about the projects that we've been working on nature-based solutions and climate adaptation. And finally, I will end with a little bit of a review of Adaptation Research Alliance, in which I am part of the secretariat. So who are we? PlanAdapt is a decentralized global network of professionals in the allied fields of climate adaptation, disaster risk reduction, climate risk management, water governance, forestry, and urban resilience. Who do we work for? Our work focuses and tries to help people that struggle with the impacts of climate change and climate injustice, particularly in the global south. Most of our projects aim to have an impact on the most vulnerable. What do we aim to improve? Well, we focus on the last mile of knowledge transfer and learning. We attempt to take knowledge to places where it is needed the most. And we try to move adaptation knowledge beyond the academic and expert circles, which means bringing in more of the community perspective and the needs of communities. What do we do? Our work is structured around action-oriented research, training and capacity development, as well as advisory services. And we focus on, or rather we are driven by value-based, purpose-based, empathy-based work. The principles that we care about that underpin a lot of our work is social inclusiveness, leaving no one behind, nature-based, which is around using ecosystems to adapt better, having economically just outcomes, and we believe a lot in the process. So who participates, who decides, and who benefits? And finally, who provides the service or the advice in the context of adaptation work? So the first project that I'm sharing here is the working group on urban EBA, which was conducted since March last year by PlanAdapt and as part of the Friends of Ecosystems-Based Adaptation in partnership with IUCN. Why an urban EBA working group? There is limited information online about examples of urban EBA measures, particularly from the global south. And it was felt that we need more examples or evidence that unpack the nitty-gritty of urban EBA to increase the understanding and knowledge for practitioners, decision makers, policy makers in the global south. The working group brought together researchers and practitioners from the fields of urban development, EBA and green-gray infrastructure, in order to identify and compile examples, practical examples of urban EBA planning and implementation. And one of the things that we try to address through the working group is the lack of a climate justice lens when we look at interventions of EBA in urban areas in the global south. On the right, you see an image, which is ecosystems-based adaptation and disaster risk reduction solutions that are addressing sustainable development goals and CBD IG targets in a land and seascape. So these examples, this is a graphic by GIZ, are such that they incorporate climate change and biodiversity goals and alongside a range of sustainable development goals. The agreed working group objectives were to share knowledge and learning on urban EBA initiatives in both policy and practice, identify and compile practical examples of the work, and produce a joint FIBA urban EBA technical paper, as well as share references, consultancy vacancies, etc. on the group. So why are we and how are we rethinking the problem? We are looking at urban areas which have green and gray infrastructure, and we're looking at a range of benefits that such infrastructure generate. but critically, we are looking at climate justice. So the publication is going to be out soon. It's in draft form right now. It's called Climate Justice for People and Nature through Urban EBA. The examples that we have are plotted on this map, mostly from the global south of the 33 survey results that were analyzed, but also 7 or 8 from the global north. The second project that I would like to share, which is also nearly completed, is a scoping study on nature-based urban flood management approaches, which was done by Plan Adapt for CDKN and IESS, University of Ghana. What is the practical impact of this study? The practical impact is to inform a learning exchange for officials from Accra municipality in Ghana to learn about EBA and nature-based solutions for flood management. So what were reviewed were solutions currently in Kenya and South Africa, Cape Town, Durban or eThekwini, Nairobi and Mombasa. And finally, it was agreed that we must come out with a policy brief that is of relevance for more cities from the global south, not just officials from Accra. In this scoping study, we started with looking at urban flooding causes, which are often related to poor urban planning or urban planning that was existing, compounded by impacts of urbanization, and then the vulnerability mostly of people living on wetlands and degraded land through the impacts of climate change, such as heavy rainfall or extreme precipitation events. We also looked at integrated flood risk solutions in the 4 cities across non-structural and structural solutions that were both soft, which is nature-based, and then hard, which is gray. So the publication itself will soon be available on CDKN and Plan Adapt websites. The recommendations based on this study include dialogue and liaison with relevant national government departments, aligning projects and programs with relevant departments at local level. Very importantly, establishing knowledge partnerships with local universities, think tanks, as well as civil society organizations. We found that wherever local governments were unable to implement solutions because of the land ownership problems, civil society organizations could step in and address adaptation and vulnerability needs. Another recommendation is joining of international city networks to access similar approaches being practiced in cities globally, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, such as ICLEI, C40, more recently the city's finance facility, C40's finance facility, among others. Developing a suite of options that require the most suitable configuration of partnerships and alliances. And a learning, particularly from eThekwini, is a learning by doing approach that factors in climatic, social, and economic drivers of flood events and impacts, and proceeds by designing solutions in consultation and collaboration with a broad range of affected parties, particularly vulnerable communities. And finally, we felt that putting in place capacity building and mentoring processes that encourage the application of social principles in the design and implementation of EBA would be useful. EBA itself is an approach that addresses several social principles of climate justice, and that's also recommended. So a couple of slides now on the Adaptation Research Alliance, which is a part of the UK 26 presidency's Adaptation and Resilience campaign, where FCDO is working with partners to co-develop an international adaptation research alliance, which will be launched at COP26. So more importantly, and most importantly for us at Plan Adapt, it's a coalition across the adaptation research and action communities. And we are bringing together researchers and traditional research funders with action funders. You can find more information on the link below. However, Adaptation Research Alliance will be getting its own website soon. The current development aims to increase investment in action-oriented adaptation research, which is particularly driven by end-user needs to help create practical and effective adaptation and resilience solutions. So what are these activities going to promote or aim to promote is collaborative and Southern-led modalities of adaptation and resilience research, strengthening local universities and research institutions, lead to capacity building, and facilitate linkages between research and implementation at multiple levels. There are already examples of action-oriented climate adaptation projects in Eastern Africa, which have been funded by the DFID and UK aid, such as Scipia, strengthening climate information partnerships, which focused on delivering training tailored for seasonal forecasts, and delivery of training on communicating seasonal forecasts, facilitating engagement between information providers and users that was mentioned previously in several of the presentations. The usefulness of the information depends upon ownership by those who are going to use it, and the wiser support to ICPAC. Thank you. That's the end of my presentation.